This podcast is brought to you by Celicopter. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. Celicopter handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter has sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at Celicopter today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-CELICOPTER, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@celicopter.com. Celicopter. List it, sell it, done.
Hello and welcome to the Helicopter Podcast. My name is Halsey, and today is episode number 8. That's crazy. I cannot believe it. And I am here with Erik Thresher. Erik is, I've met him one time. I sold a helicopter to a gentleman that uses Erik's services, which I'm excited to talk about a lot today in depth. And he's also a captain for Air Methods. So Erik, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
Thank you, Halsey. It's great to be on. I'm happy to be here. Excited.
I have to say, I mean, like for me being the host and you the guest, I think that your setup is actually probably better than mine. You have some soundproofing going on there. The lighting looks pretty clean. You're making me look bad, man.
I've been doing some experimenting with my home office setup here because I've been doing a little bit of online ground school for guys who are just kind of struggling with a topic or something at whatever flight school they're working with, and they hit me up. They buy an hour of time from me, and they ask me, hey, can we talk about this or that? And I got whiteboards set up behind me.
That's cool.
And, we just talk through stuff. So
it's such with all the different tools today, and specifically like with COVID, right? I mean, COVID like made us all this, meetings, Zoom meetings and work from home. And, it really has changed how people view distance, right? I mean, you're in North Carolina, I'm here in Texas. I could be in Zimbabwe and you could be teaching me ground, right?
That's right.
It's just a really cool concept, and it's great for entrepreneurial spirits like yourself that want to do more than just what you're already doing, which is a lot, being a full-time air ambulance pilot. So I want to touch on everything about your company, which is called Helicopter Safety Services, formerly Thresher. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not, but
yeah, that's right.
When did you change the name?
I actually changed the name. I filed the paperwork probably 4 or 5 months ago. It was time it was time to move something more serious sounding. You couldn't tell what Thresher was about, so I think something that gave it away in the name was a little more appropriate. And
hey man, I'm all about that. We were for about 4 years. We were Aircraft Brokerage of Texas, ABT, because we're in Texas, duh. And then people were like, well, what do you sell? And I guess, do you sell all aircraft? It's like, oh no, we're only helicopters. And are you only in Texas? It's like, no, we're all over, so
right.
We did the name change about a year ago as well to Celicopter, which is just like yours, kind of tells you what we do. So I support that.
It's sort of like, you got to fake it till you make it, right? Because I'm a very small company. I mean, it's myself plus pilots who I'm close to that I contract with to help kind of fill seats for guys that need pilots or instructors.
Sure.
But a name like that carries a little more weight for sure. And just, and as we grow and get bigger, I think it'll be more fitting over time.
You got to abbreviate it too. Like, yeah, I work for HSS, I own HSS.
Exactly.
Like that really makes it sound official. Well, it sounds like you're really well on your way. Obviously I've worked with you a little bit in the past, and I know that you're just a high level of professionalism, knowledge, and you bring a lot to different students in different parts of the industry. So real fast, just give us a bit of a recap. I know that you've done oil, gas, news, and most recently EMS, but why don't you just walk us through your couple-minute career path here in the helicopter industry?
Sure. So I will say, first off, that compared to some of your other guests and compared to a lot of the other people we work with and fly with, I'm a baby in this industry. And proud to admit it, because I'm a student at heart and always trying to learn something. And I recognize really how little I've been in this. So, I did my first solo flight in 2011. So that's 10 years ago now. Mm-hmm. It was a beautiful summer day, doors off in R-22. It was absolutely terrifying. But progressed on from there, work through my ratings. I just did one after another. Like the day I finished a check ride, the next morning I was out starting my next rating, starting my next certificate. You kind of got to get in check ride mode, when you're going to push through all the certificates. Just do it, and don't stop. But so I worked through the ratings. I was answering phones at the flight school at the time, so I was constantly around the flight school environment and just listening and learning over shoulders. Like, oh, okay, that Charlie Airspace, that makes more sense now without having to pay for it. It's kind of cool.
It's great.
Then I taught at that flight school for a couple of years here in North Carolina, and they're still around. Total Flight Solutions, they've expanded. They're quite busy. A lot of airplane flying now as well. But I eventually progressed to operations manager of the company. Kept teaching full time, and then from there I got my first sort of turbine job, which was in a Long Ranger up in New York City with Zip Aviation. There's a bunch of helicopter operators up there. They all run more or less the same way, but it's some exciting flying, just kind of being busy. And I just really did one long summer season up there before the Gulf really picked up, and they're like, we need 407 pilots down here now. And I was in a class of like, it was probably 15 or 20 407 pilots, all within a couple of period that they hired. And so I flew offshore in the Gulf for a little while under a contract with Enbridge Energy, flying a couple gas measurement technicians around the Gulf. And then after that, I got kind of sick of the commute and, talking about the work-life home balance. I wanted to kind of be flying in the state that I lived in. It would simplify a lot of things. So, I was living in North Carolina and commuting to Louisiana to fly offshore. So I said, well, let's find something back home. So news helicopter position just sort of magically opened up, and it was in a 407. I was like, man, on the interview, I can hop right in this thing. I've been flying them every day out in the summer sun, over the Gulf. So I had a great interview, accepted that job. I did the news for a while with Sky 5, fantastic, very small operation, really just 2 pilots and 1 helicopter. And then after that, I sort of bided my time and put in the hours until I could sort of get that first multi-engine job, which was with Air Methods. And I started in an EC-135 as my primary aircraft. I was promoted to lead pilot of that base. It was a brand new base, which had its own challenges, trying to open a new base and get everything off the ground and running. And then I moved to the nearest base to my house here and switched my primary aircraft to the 429. So I've been flying. My primary now is a 429 and also the 135 as the backup. So we still have to.
Hold on, you got to move closer to your house and you now have to fly the 429?
I know, it's terrible. Lumbar adjustable seats and all. It's terrible.
I'm sorry to hear that, man. I have to tangent on that a little bit. I'm trying to remember. I don't think we had some practice podcasts prior to actually launching, and one of the practice podcasts was with a 429 driver. And one of the things we talked about, so I don't think it's actually aired, is there are the 429 is an amazing platform. However, it does come with some set of issues. You want to discuss that a little bit?
Yeah. So it is probably the most pleasurable aircraft to fly that I've ever flown. And I've got probably 11, 12, 13 models, something like that, of experience of regular flying of different models under my belt. And I always come back to the 429. It used to be the 407. And it was because I hadn't flown the 429 before.
Of course.
And, now I'd be a happy man if I never flew anything other than the 429 for the rest of my life. It's just everything from the ergonomics of the cockpit to the available power to how easy the autopilot is to run to just everything. No circuit breakers accessible in flight by the pilot. Not a single circuit breaker, right? So just a lot of things were well thought out on that. However, it has its drawbacks in this particular role and others that need weight. So, EMS interiors are heavy, crews are heavy, patients are heavy, stretchers are heavy. All the stuff that goes on board, has a weight cost. And Bell, in all their forward thinking, really wanted to get this 429 in production and get it certified. And they got it certified basically with a 7,000 pound weight limit placed on it by the FAA. Elsewhere in the world, it flies at 7,500 and 8,000 pounds, some even higher. And for public use, it doesn't have those limits, but the FAA limits it at 7,000 pounds, which really limits us as far as fuel and range on it when we have to carry a patient and whatnot. So that's really the only drawback of the whole helicopter, honestly. I mean, everything I love about it, but we have got to stop for fuel just a little too often.
Yeah.
An extra 500 pounds will go a long way.
Yeah, I've heard quite a bit about it. I mean, and that is, unfortunately, like you say, I mean, it's, as I've never flown it, but, it's an incredibly popular aircraft. Pilots love flying it, but this is certainly a bit of a Achilles heel for that aircraft, this whole weight thing. Do you know, I mean, is there anything in the works to try to get that fixed? Or, I mean, that might be a little above both of our pay grades, but, I'm guessing EMS operators like Air Methods and other operators that use the 429 have to be pushing pretty hard to be able to increase that weight.
Yeah, and so the FAA has basically said, like, listen, you're not going to recertify this exact helicopter into a different weight class. So if you want to come out with a second version, we can look at it then. And that's basically what Bell is doing. So they're developing, and they've been test flying their 429 EDAT, the electrically distributed anti-torque. And it's basically removed the conventional tail rotor and put on 4 electrically driven fans that are built into the vertical stabilizer. It's pretty cool, but it shaves a lot of weight down as well. Because now, if it's all electrically controlled, there's no tail rotor push rods back and forth. There's no gearboxes out there. There's no control cables running up the windshield all the way back to there's none of that. So, and from what I've read, it could lose like 2 out of the 4 fans could go offline, and it could still have enough anti-torque for directional control. But so they're looking at an option like that, and kind of from what I'm hearing is that if some of these operators put in, a minimum order, then Bell will basically commit to producing it and selling it. But I think they're kind of feeling out the market because they pissed off a lot of 429 operators.
Oh, yeah.
They're a fantastic company, but they pissed off a lot of people.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, it's been a strong talking point, but it's a beautiful aircraft. I actually, you're talking about the news. I have a part-time news position. I fly maybe a couple of days a month. Sure. But I was at the hangar the other day. We actually have an office there as well. I have like a home office, but the idea of like driving to work and then being in a hangar full of aircraft, including helicopters, it kind of motivates you to maybe work a little bit harder. So we actually just got some office space there, and I don't know whose aircraft it is. The end number is untrackable, but it's there's a 429 parked in the hangar, and it's like, they have it all roped off. It's like a museum, and it's just like, we got the little Bell Jet Ranger next to it for the news. And then this 429, it's just it's a massive aircraft first and foremost. It
kind of sneaks up on you. You don't realize till you're standing next to it, like, wow, this isn't an upgraded 407. Like, this is a whole different aircraft.
Yeah, no, and that's how I felt. I haven't spent a ton of time ever really actually. I think I've been one other time a couple of years ago, in the presence of a 429 and just standing by it was like, oh my gosh, like this is a big boy helicopter for sure.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So you've worked your way up into an EMS position, but you also, of course, have your own business, formerly Thresher LLC, but now Helicopter Safety Services. So obviously there's a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. How long have you been doing your own thing, and what kind of jump started that?
So I started this company about 3 years ago, and it was really when I was flying news full time and I was starting to develop an off time schedule, and I'd finish, if I was on morning shifts for that week, we'd work like a week of mornings, week of days. I'd be off at 9 a.m. and had nothing to do for the rest of the day. Go home, spend time with the wife, do some chores around the house. But I was like, man, I could fly something else,
Yeah.
It was all Part 91, so there weren't any flight time limitations or anything like that I had to be concerned with. So I found a couple of clients who kind of found me, and I started flying with them and teaching them just primary flight instruction, learning to fly for the first time, and I was like, I need to keep doing this. I never kind of stopped teaching, but I said I need to take this more seriously. So put something together, form an LLC, organize it. Start developing some documentation, some training curriculum stuff, and then just kind of making it more official. And to this day, it's honestly not slowed down. It's, I've got a website, I've got an Instagram profile, but like literally all of my advertising is word of mouth, just from happy clients that have hired me for just a little bit of ground school or something, or to come out and fly their personal helicopter, or to teach one of their pilots this or that. And, things like new airframe transitions are just some of the most fun you can have, taking someone who already knows how to fly and like, yeah, but here's what this helicopter is like, and here's what this one can do, and here's how it's different. And you get to meet a lot of interesting folks that way.
So, you operate in the sense of you can provide pilots for people that just want to pilot. You do flight training as well?
Yeah. So by and large, I do most of I perform most of the services myself. And then for the ones that I can't, it's nice to have a problem where you're growing so fast you can't staff it, So my phone rings and I'm like, well, I can't do that. I'm already booked on that day, but I've got pilots for you. So what I've really done is I've taken the direction of this company to be basically a network of pilots that they're qualified, they want to work, and they just don't know how to find work. Well, I can find work because my phone's ringing all the time and I can't do it all myself, So I've got a network of good guys, a lot of current EMS pilots, a lot of current news pilots, guys with an off schedule who want to work some in the off time, and it's fun. It's fun flying. It's something different every day.
It's really cool. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, with most other industries, you have staffing companies, right? Where, if you're able to provide someone short-term help or even long-term help, or, and plus you expand your reach, right? If you're in North Carolina and someone needs you in Texas, then, you could pick up the phone and call someone in Texas. Hey, me,
That's
you
right.
can call me. I'll go fly.
That's right.
But no, it's really cool, man. And starting a business, I mean, it's no joke. It's really challenging. You mentioned, starting an LLC, and there's just so much that goes into it where it's, it can actually make doing what you're doing maybe not as fun anymore. As you just have to push through that. Have you had some challenges just on that business side that have almost kind of made you rethink what you're doing?
Yeah, just sort of like, how do I track this? Like, accounting is not my strong suit. So keeping track of expenses and stuff, and I use like an app on my phone now to do it, and it's simplified some things, but like every year going through it to get ready for taxes and stuff. And even though it's very small, that's the stuff that's not my strong suit. For me, I just, be flying all day or teaching ground school all day and just, something flying related. But the numbers, that's, I got to, or working on advertising. I'm seeing, I've got other friends who have businesses and they have a huge online presence. They're like, oh, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. I'm like, I have no idea how any of that works. Like, I have a fairly simple profile. I post videos of just me doing something interesting. I'll post it up there if anybody wants to see, but I don't have time to chase the likes and chase the followers and stuff. It's really, my content is really face to face and it's in person, and that's what drives my business. So that sort of thing is tough. I'm not in the 21st century when it comes to the social media stuff right now, but
yeah. And I mean, I think that there's kind of both ways, right? I mean, it sounds like you're really busy, right? So, I mean, one would argue, I talked to someone recently, not in the helicopter world, and a kind of a guy that I mentor on he does videography. And, he's like, man, I'm so busy, I can't even make a website. I said, well, then don't make a website, if the phone's ringing, then, there's nothing that says you have to have a website, right?
Right. You're doing something right.
And social media is great. Obviously, we utilize some social media, and we're expanding social media on my side. But, there's, sometimes just specifically in a niche helicopter world like we're in, just word of mouth, being a good person, doing the right things, providing a great service that people want to talk about, then that's going to give you the business that you need. I think sometimes actually people get into this, analysis paralysis of starting a business of like, I have to do this and I have to do that. And it's like, well, really, you don't have to do any of that, right? It's some businesses do, right? Coca-Cola's of the world and other big businesses, they have to spend a ton of money on ads and they have to do this and do that. But, when you're a small business and you're kind of finding your footing, cash in the bank is important. I would rather have money in the bank than, spend a whole bunch of money on advertising, specifically in a small niche market. So it's awesome that you're doing well. It's good for my business, right? When people are doing well in the helicopter world, specifically small businesses, and people are flying helicopters, I love that. So, congrats. It's, you said you started now 3 years ago.
Yep.
That's hard, man. At 3 years, that's a big milestone. And so it's really cool to kind of see that success for you, and I'm really happy for you. And I think I'm just throwing it out there, but like this whole like teaching ground, from your studio there, I mean, come on. I mean, I think that could be a big game changer for a lot of people as well.
Yeah. And because like back when I was doing my training, 2010, 2011, like the cutting edge stuff was the 20-year-old, CDs and DVDs from King School, that you just watch these endless videos over and over again.
Watching Martha and her husband, right? What's her husband's name?
John. Yeah. And then, so that was like that was basically all you could do, is sort of going to the flight school and hiring your instructor again. And now, of course, with the advent of YouTube and everything else, there's a lot you can learn for free online, right? But I think there is a specific market that's not really being filled now, especially this distance learning of talk to a flight instructor live and get actual in-depth answers and real world practical answers for what your question is. You don't have to watch another YouTube video on it. You don't have to, it's about actually having an interaction with somebody, even if you can't during these COVID times. And it's in a lot of ways, I'm cheaper than them having to get in their car and drive to the flight school for a minimum of 2 hours or 3 hours or something. And, so it's customizable. It's kind of like whatever you need, and, so I'm having a lot of fun with that. And it's really been the hour here, hour there. Just guys that say, hey, I found you online. I'm really struggling with airspace. Can we talk about airspace? I'm like, glad you found me. How did you find me? And let's do it, set up a time and date, and there we go.
That's really cool. We'll do it at the end too, but since we're talking about it, if someone does want to reach out for some ground help, some pilot services, whatnot, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Sure. Easiest way is just go directly to my website, which is www.safehelicopters.com.
Awesome. All right. Safehelicopters.com. That's easy. I can remember that as well. So safe, right? You obviously helicopter safety services, helicoptersafe.com, all these things. There's a lot of safety emphasis. And in the email that you sent me on some talking points, you brought up some really cool topics. So I just kind of want to dive right into that. And the first one I think is one of my favorites, and this is a great discussion, is building comfort and fighting complacency as you become more comfortable. Right. And I'm really glad that you made that point, kind of in some talking points, because I haven't touched on that yet in the helicopter podcast. And I think that if anything bites helicopter pilots in the tush, is getting too comfortable. Whether you're flying the news and you're doing the same, 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. shift every day, and you're doing the same, orbiting over the same city, you're flying the same A to B milk run for your EMS position, flying offshore, complacency is truly a killer. So I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts on how you've been successful in your career flying a multitude of different aircraft, different missions, different profiles, in which you've maybe felt yourself becoming complacent, and what you've done to kind of overcome that and what you do every day.
Sure. So, I think one of the most interesting things about working at different jobs in this industry is every company, every operator, every co-pilot, every captain you're training under, every check airman, they all have a slightly or very different approach to safety. Some of these larger companies have massive safety management systems and rules and policies have to be abided by. And these things are binders and binders thick of policies. And others are, listen, just don't wreck the helicopter and just be legal. And that's the whole safety management system, for some of these smaller Part 91 operators. A lot of them don't have anything written down or anything formalized as far as safety management. But, something as simple as like an EMS, we do a formalized risk assessment before every flight. And it's literally checking boxes in it with everything from weather to maintenance to, it could be anything. Is this flight going to take me past the 12th hour of my shift? Does all this stuff, right? And it comes up with an actual, numerical value of risk, which does it exist in real life? No, but it's given us an idea of what's our risk value involved with making this flight. And, in all the Part 91 flying that I do, so flying with private clients or teaching students, with them not having ever worked for a large operator that like makes a numerical risk value or risk calculation like that, they're not really thinking in terms of risk assessment and then risk aversion, right? And how to avoid risk altogether, how to minimize it, and so these are calculations that we're kind of running in our head throughout each flight, right? As you fly more and you get more hours and more experience, you start looking at things in a different way. And I think young pilots, early pilots, new pilots, they haven't been taught that risk assessment skill of how to look at a situation and say, is this legal to do? Yes. Is this relatively safe to do? Yes. But is it actually presenting a lot of risk that might not exist if we just make the flight tomorrow? Or, it's like, yeah, we are going to be pushing the weather a little bit, but we've also been flying all day. We each only have maybe 3 hours in this airframe, so low level of comfort in this aircraft. This is just too risky given these conditions. Let's wait for higher ceilings, or let's wait for the rain to pass through, or let's take it over a different route that's not as much risk if we were to have mechanical problems, need to make an emergency landing, sort of that hazardous terrain, avoidance. But, risk assessment and risk avoidance and, is something that we're constantly working with, right? There's no such thing as a risk-free flight. It doesn't exist. We take a calculated risk every time we leave the ground. So it's how do we calculate that risk? So any skills that we can give new and upcoming pilots from day one to help them adequately assess their own risk once they're able to, right? Will prepare them endlessly for the future and being more successful and being able to say no. Because ultimately, when you're hired to fly a job, you're not hired to fly the aircraft. You're hired to use your judgment to know when to say no. I mean, that's what the higher level operators are all looking for, is the ability for you to stand up and say, I can't do that. Not safe, not going to put your aircraft or your passengers and clients in that situation. Can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a big change in the industry over the last, 10, 15 years, specifically on the air medical side. there used to be a lot more of a mentality of dollars and cents kind of over making, common sense decisions.
Sure.
And, I know that a lot of EMS operators, big operators are pushing towards that, but there's still, like you said, a lot of Part 91 operators, whether it's news companies, utility or whatnot, that don't have a formal SMS system.
Right.
Maybe don't operate under a just culture. I think the advent, I don't know if you invent a just culture, but this whole idea of, hey, if you break something or you do something wrong, hey, if you bring it to our attention and it wasn't negligent, then it's going to go through a process, but most likely you're not going to lose your job. Right. I overtorqued a helicopter one time at my old job, and there was no tattletale that would have said that I overtorqued it. But,
right.
I told, I was okay with losing my job because I didn't want to go fly the aircraft that I just overtorqued to make sure that it wasn't, before it got properly inspected. But also I don't want to put anyone else in that position.
Right.
So I think it's, I felt comfortable because I knew the company that I worked for would look at it like, hey, let's go down of why you overtorqued. And then let's see if we can mitigate it. Is it systemic? Is it a problem that maybe... and it actually found out that we had kind of a creeping collective, and yes, you always keep your hand on the collective, but sometimes, you put your hand on your leg and, before you know it, I put myself in a complacency situation, right? Caused by, kind of a flying collective. So, I'm very familiar with the risk analysis myself. My flight school actually implemented that. Would you also say, though, within the RA, the risk analysis, that you can find complacency if you're just, I'm guilty. I feel like at my air medical job, there is a risk analysis, and sometimes you're just like clicking through the buttons.
You can be
pressing
complacent in assessing your risk.
Yeah,
it's kind of
right.
It's kind of ironic, but absolutely,
it's so silly. And I think that one portion of it is training people to respect the limits and the understanding of what the helicopter can do. To you, right? I think that specifically with a lot of the people that you may work with, wealthier individuals learning how to fly, certainly guys that I've dealt with as well, is I feel like I really have to push like, hey, the helicopter is cool and it's fun, but it will kill you. Like if you're not making the right decisions, you're pushing weather, you're pushing your skill, you misjudge the winds and you put yourself in a weird tailwind landing situation and you settle with power, whatever it might be. It seems like they don't realize it's just like this fun, cool thing, until it's not. Right. It's always been kind of my thing. Like helicopter's cool until it's not so cool anymore. So what are some things that you do with your students and your personal self? I mean, to really drive home this idea of not becoming so comfortable that you could walk yourself into a problem.
So I'll give you an example of good comfort and then maybe an example of complacency that I've seen even recently. So just talking about a flight that I myself made. It was about 2 weeks ago. It was a night flight. We were going to pick up a patient. I don't remember where from or where to, but it was 2 or 3 in the morning. We're all tired. We all get out of bed. We do our walk around. We do the whole procedure. We get in the helicopter and we take off. And, I've got enough time in this Bell now that I know where the switches are by feel, right? There's not that many to deal with, but that level of comfort when you need it is saying, I don't need to look for that switch. My muscle memory knows where it is. And that goes a long, long way when the shit hits the fan, right? And I think that is something that's not trained enough in primary instruction too. It's like, yes, look at the switch and verify it, and now get to know where that switch is, where it feels. If you had smoke in the cockpit, could you find it, et cetera, right? If you had adrenaline coursing through your veins in an emergency situation, could you still flip that switch or pull that knob? But so we're flying along, we're at 2,000 feet, it's dark out, we're all under goggles, and then we got the patient on board, we're heading to a hospital, and they say, hey, can you turn the oxygen on? Well, that valve is back behind me. I'm wearing these big bulky goggles on a helmet, I know where the valve is. I reach for it, pull it. I say, hey, 5 minutes later, hey, can you turn the air conditioner down a little bit? It's a little bit cold back here. Yeah, I can do that. I know where that knob is. It's right back here, And every little thing, they say, can you turn the lights up back here? Turn on some of the extra lights. Yep, I can do that. Click. Maybe a quick glance to verify, but you don't want to be pulling at your flashlight. I need to be looking outside for things to avoid. The stuff outside is what's going to kill you. It's not the stuff in the helicopter. So, being able to not have to have your eyes inside all the time is really critical. So, and this is something I think it's really not taught well enough in the budding pilot industry, the flight instruction training industries, because, I'm flying with a student in the 44 the other day, and every time he reaches down to change a radio frequency, he loses 200 feet of altitude, right? I can't blame him. He needs practice, right? But the place to learn how to change radio frequencies is not in the air, right? The place to learn how to manipulate that radio is on the ground. You know, it's like guys who enjoy shooting, like shooting guns, right? They do a lot of dry fire drills, the ones who practice a lot. There's no reason why we can't do more dry fire drills in aviation. Hook up that ground power unit on the ground, run all your avionics, talk to a mechanic if you want to make sure you're doing it safely and correctly, turn on all your avionics and run them. There are now emulators on iPads for Garmin 650s and 750s, 430s, 530s. You can play with all this stuff and get to know it inside and out before you ever even climb in the cockpit. So there's no reason why you need to look at that knob to make sure you did 8 clicks. Grab the knob you know is going to give you the small digits and click it 8 times. Then just look once and verify. Done. No altitude loss. Eyes are outside for most of it. You know, so those sort of dry fire drills are stuff that I don't think is done enough and taught enough, you know, to primary students as they're coming up. Like, listen, we're going to try and make as much of this muscle memory as possible. Not just the wiggling the sticks part, but all the other little things that come along, you know. So that's an example of kind of being comfortable in your aircraft and just knowing where things are, and it helps you in a time of need, right? Now, complacency, right? Something that we're constantly fighting, because you can certainly, like you said, get too comfortable. You take off out of your base or out of your helipad, and there's never any traffic. There's never any airplanes overhead. There's never any skydivers or parachutes, right? Because you just know the area. Well, one day when you're not looking as hard as you used to, there is going to be something. And we will have maybe caused an airborne collision, maybe have loss of life involved, simply because I didn't look outside far enough, because I just had that trust. Because it never happened in the past, it's not going to happen now, right? These hazardous attitudes that we learn about during our CFI training, you know, it's actually true. I mean, this is flying is really a practical application of human psychology, is all that it is, you know, and it's a constant experiment. You're constantly learning how other pilots fly and how you fly and how your crew reacts and how you react under stress. And so, yeah, fighting that complacency. And that can mean there are certain things you can do, right? So you open your hangar door, you walk up to your helicopter, say you're flying an R-66, it's your personal helicopter, and you're pre-flying it the same way you always do. You always do this, then that, then you put the oil in, then you do this, then you check the controls, the next time you come out, do the pre-flight in the exact opposite direction. Take yourself out of your comfort zone and do it intentionally in a way that makes you look at it differently. And you will find something. You will find something because you are out of your element. So there are certain things that it is good to have a routine for, right? If you're programming and setting up the panel for an instrument approach in the same model that you fly all the time, find your system and stick to it. That way you will know, using that checklist, there are no steps left out. However, things like a pre-flight, manufacturer has their recommended pre-flight procedure. Do it literally in the opposite order. It doesn't say what order you have to do it in, right? You can do the do verify, do it and then come back to the checklist.
Sure.
But take yourself out of that comfort zone, force yourself to be uncomfortable, and you will learn something every single time. It works like magic. I wish more people would do it.
I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of had this thought. It's funny that you say this, because I actually started doing pre-flights the opposite direction than I used to, just because the ladder was on that side. I'm like, well, I don't want to walk all the way around. And then this just doesn't make any sense. You know, it's kind of the ergonomics of it. But it actually did make me kind of focus a little bit harder on different things, you know, and kind of see it from a different perspective. I've talked about that before as like a flight instructor, that you start to see flying from a different perspective. And I think that you're almost creating that same different perspective by changing that. And honestly, no one's ever said it out loud to me. So I think that's a really cool teaching point that you just made of, you know, if it's a pre-flight, something that is safe to kind of adjust and look at it from a different angle, you might find something, you know, and that's right. It's a really cool thing. And I agree wholeheartedly with the static training. I think back in the day, I mean, even, you know, when I was training, which is not, I mean, around the same time that you were, technology still was very different than it is today. iPads weren't a thing. I remember, I think halfway through my flight training, I saw my first iPhone. So, I mean, things have really changed a lot in like the last 10 years. I remember a lot of what we would do is like look at the, you know, the poster of the interior cockpit and kind of, you know, try to figure out, and it's somewhat effective, right? But not truly effective. So if you're out at your helicopter and you're actually, you know, you plug it into the ground power unit, you're checking things, getting comfortable and training that muscle memory, it's a fantastic way to do it. So, I think that's awesome, and I think it's a great point. And hopefully you can kind of create that muscle memory. And I would just, you know, my 2 cents on it all as well is just always, I feel like I always try to question myself if I feel like I'm doing something that seems like I'm pushing it, rushing it, or even becoming complacent. You know, if you've looked at the same helicopter, sometimes at an EMS position, right? The helicopter might not fly for like 4 days.
Yep.
But you still show up and you do a whole pre-flight. Some guys don't. I know that firsthand experience. But I always told myself that if I don't go and do that pre-flight this one time, the next time it's going to make it easier for me not to do it. And then you create this chain of kind of a bad habit, right? And to me, it was like just this consistency of always doing the right thing, and then be mad at yourself. Like if you know, you get in, the weather's, you're not flying all night. You know, you check into your EMS base, it's IFR all night. Oh, I don't need a pre-flight. I'm not going to fly. To me, that's a hazardous attitude. It's like, no, you got to go pre-flight. Build this routine, because if you build a routine in which doesn't include doing a good thorough pre-flight, it's just going to be easier and easier. It's kind of, it exacerbates itself over time. So it's a good point. And I often find that as you gain more experience, or guys that I've worked with, and hey, I'm going to raise my hand. I've been complacent and I've done things where, you know, flying along and I look down, I'm like, oh, that switch should probably be on. And maybe I should have used the checklist, right? You know, so I'm guilty of complacency. So I'm not trying to call people out here, but I do see it with a lot of higher time pilots specifically that, you know, have really a higher level of complacency. You know, I always talk to people, oh, he flew, you know, in Vietnam and this and that. I feel so safe with him. And sometimes I think in my head, like, well, you know, sometimes that can be a bit of a hindrance. Yeah, well, I mean, the truth is, for a lot of them, their complacency runs deeper. You know, it's only been reinforced over years and years and decades, you know, and so it's even that much harder to break out of. So, yeah, I mean, we are absolutely all guilty of it. You know, there's really, you know, I always tell my students, there's no such thing as a perfect flight, right? We all make mistakes. At literally every interview I've had for a pilot job, they say, you know, tell me how you are as a pilot. Tell me about you as a pilot. I said, I'm not a perfect pilot. I said, I make mistakes. I try not to make the same mistake more than once. You know, and on top of that, I try to learn from other people's mistakes so I don't have to make them all myself, right? The world is filled with aviators making mistakes. There are reports, there are safety reports, there's NASA reports, there's you can read through the NTSB's database. You can see exactly what people are doing. You can talk with people at the FBO, at wherever, and you can learn from their mistakes without having to put yourself at risk making it yourself. Seriously. You know, so it's being able to be open and receptive of that, and first acknowledging I'm not perfect, I'm gonna make mistakes, and then at the end of every flight, and like you said, through each flight, find something you did wrong, you know, and don't focus on it so much that it detracts, you know, from the flying experience and the focus, but, you know, find what you did wrong and debrief it and try not to make that same mistake again. I mean, that part is critical, you know, so, you know, I always say, if you think you've had a perfect flight, you weren't paying attention, you know, you did something that wasn't quite right. Find that, you know, so, you know, it's the same thing as a wise flight instructor back in the day once told me, it was back to pre-flighting, you know, he said, no helicopter is perfect. They all have something. And if an FAA, you know, an inspector were to come out here and ground ramp check a bunch of people on the ground, he'd find something he could probably ground this helicopter for. A decal that's peeling off, a placard that's faded. Of course.
Right. You know, so if you approach every time you pre-flight your aircraft as though the last guy broke it and didn't tell anybody, he said, you will have a healthy respect for this machine. Every time you walk up to that helicopter, you can safely assume the last guy might have broken it and he didn't want to tell anybody for fear of getting fired, or he didn't know that he broke it, right? Or maybe nothing happened. But if you treat it like that, as this machine with limitations, with faults, and you find those faults and you basically gather up all these faults at the end of a pre-flight and say, none of these things affect the airworthiness, I'm safe to fly this. That's ultimately your authority and your responsibility as PIC, you know? So that's forgotten. You get in the same helicopter every day. You pre-flight it the same way every day. Some days it's raining. I'm not going to pre-flight it. They're not going to call me. Well, then the weather clears and now you got a rushed pre-flight, if no pre-flight at all. And then, you know, on the topic of distractions, right? If I'm flying, knowing full well I didn't actually pre-flight the helicopter today, that is always in the back of my mind, and I am not 100% there. I am now thinking, what did I miss because I didn't pre-flight? What is that sound? You know, all the squeaks are louder at night, right? You're cruising along and you're like, is that normal? Does it always sound like that? Should I land? Should I check this out? And it's like, if you have to think, well, I didn't even actually pre-flight it, so there could be a wrench under the gearbox somewhere, you know, maybe you need to get back into your pre-flight routine.
Yeah, I have. I found a wrench one time on a deck in an EC-130. And you know, I think that also some I think that there's like some pillars that you should always just abide by, like some things in the industry that are changing. Like for me personally, like I will never get in a helicopter without first doing a final walk around.
Absolutely.
I think that for me, a final walk around and then to then go into my next little pillar would be a 3 to 5 second hover check.
Yep,
to me,
absolutely.
those are two simple steps that can really save your bacon.
Yep.
One of my favorite people in the world, Marcus Grucke, helicopter pilot, was my boss for a long time. German dude, he always said, save your bacon. So I always like, that's my, it's going to save your bacon. I remember he was teaching me the final walk, like, that's going to save your bacon. Whether it's saving your bacon because you left your blades tied down, which does happen, right?
It
so
does.
like get in a habit of keeping your blades 90 degrees, right? If they're 90 degrees and a 206 or, two-bladed rotor system, then they're not going to be tied down. Do this final walk around. Are you going to be the guy that, gets back from the Grand Canyon tour? We used to fill halfway up and your gas cap is gone, right? Like you don't want to be that dude because you clearly didn't do a final walk around. And I've actually had moments during a final walk around where I find something like, oh, that's weird. Or, hey, I left my cowling unlatched because I'm not human.
Right.
We even one time on my EMS job did thorough pre-flight, got on a call, and the way that I worked at Air Evac Life Team, and the crew would actually do a final walk around too. That was kind of part of their SOPs. And I'm going to say this as well. In your final walk around, you can become so glued on just the gas cap or the cowling that you could have a gorilla looking right at you and you might miss it.
Yep.
And so we do our walk around, static walk around, helicopter's not running, I get in and I start the helicopter, and the nurse gets in and she's like, hey, what should I do with the aerosol can? I said, what aerosol can? She's like, oh, the one that's above my door, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And, all three of us did a final walk around. None of us caught it.
Yep.
And then they did their final check, and right above one of the back doors, kind of on the step on the 407, under the rotor was an aerosol can, a degreaser that was left by the mechanic. And it was like, how do you miss that? Right. It was like, it was just staring at you. But I became so laser focused on just the primary, hey, my cowlings, gas cap, and honestly, was I really even laser focused? Maybe I was becoming even just complacent in my walk around itself. And so it just shows like you let yourself lapse for, 1 second. That could really be a detriment. We could have taken off. Most likely the aerosol can falls, hits the ground, not a big deal. But what if it falls as we're going forward airspeed, knocks out my tail rotor? There's just a lot of things that could have happened.
Or nothing could have happened. You never could have realized that you made that mistake.
It. Yeah.
And what is it next time, Yeah.
They talk about that too. And I don't know who came up with this. I think it's a long time ago, but it's this rule of 300. Have you heard of that before?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah. So I'm sure listeners can vet me on this. And I don't know who said it, who came up with it. I think whoever did was long before the advent of helicopters. And it's essentially this mindset of like, you can do the wrong thing up to 300 times, and then it's going to bite you in the butt on the 300th time. So you can have a long career of building bad habits that lead to a negative result. And the whole purpose is like, don't allow yourself to ever get into this mindset where, you're relying on being safe for 300 times, right? Create this good habit so this rule doesn't apply to you. And I think that's the problem, though. I mean, historically, right, the helicopter, even if you don't pre-fly it, most likely it's not going to crash. Like, most likely it's going to be okay. Right. And on the 300th time, it's not going to be okay anymore. And so if you create this negative habit, this rule of 300 almost allows you to just become more complacent until it finally bites you in the butt. So I think it's just really important as a helicopter pilot, and I appreciate it. I'm happy to hear that your service and your teaching is focusing on this complacency, creating good habits, doing static ground training. I think that was one of your best points. If you are new to flying, if you're at a flight school, you own your own helicopter, whatever it is, I hope that you take Erik up on that, because, practicing, getting that muscle memory while you're not in the chaos of learning how to fly and just trying not to die. I think that's fantastic. So that's really cool. Now, I have to say, it's kind of funny. I was reading your email prior, and I saw this Thresher's 10% rule, and Full disclosure, we've met one time. I forgot that your last name was Thresher. And I'm thinking, like, what's this Thresher 10% rule? I should know this, And then I read to the bottom of the email.
It's not in the books yet.
His last name is Thresher. So what is this rule that you've created? And I'm very curious to hear all about it.
So the 10%, this comes from, and many people that I've talked to in the industry would argue that it's maybe higher, but this comes from the fact that over the years I've observed that everybody, absolutely everybody, from pilots to crew members to mechanics to spectators, from experienced to inexperienced, absolutely everybody loses 10% of their brain capacity in and around a running aircraft. Everybody. Never fails. 10,000 hours of time in a 206, you're 10% dumber the second you push the starter. Right? Yep. You've been flying, you've been working around helicopters as a mechanic forever. Those blades are turning. You are that close to walking into the tail rotor, no matter how comfortable you are. It's like getting back to complacency, but it's what it really is, it is a stressful environment being around a running aircraft. That's one of the hardest things to adjust to as a new student, is like to do regular things like move my left hand, move my right hand. Those are things we're used to doing, but not when a screaming 4-cylinder engine behind you is running, spinning blades over your head. Yep. The whole thing is shaking. The doors are off. There's wind. There's a guy next to you named John who you don't know, and he's like, left pedal, man, left pedal, come on. And you're like, I'm just terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing, so, but it carries on. I was at an EMS base. This was up in the Northeast. I was picking up some overtime, and we were training up some new crew members who had been working on the ground forever, paramedics and nurses, and they were just transitioned to the flight line. And we're sitting there idling. We're discussing the weather. We're discussing fuel, and we're looking at daylight. And someone in the back says, with more experience than I, says, "Hey, should we grab the goggles before we take off? It's like 1:00 in the afternoon, but it's gonna be dark in 4 hours. Any delays, we're gonna need goggles." I say, "Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at idle. If you're comfortable, hop out, go grab some goggles, bring them back. Go out the same door, come back in the same door." And he said, "Okay, Roger. All right." He unplugs his helmet. I could hear him go, chink, unplug the helmet. He takes his helmet off, then gets outside the running helicopter. It's the EC-135. And the second he reaches about my shoulder, I see him going, because it's hot and loud and there's debris and stuff. I mean, the thing's running. It's not idle, but it's still underneath the running helicopter. It's like, it's like, what, if you were watching someone do that, you'd be like, that's dumb. Why didn't he just wear his helmet? But there he made the mistake himself. We all are operating under diminished mental capacity when we fly. From the second you start walking up to the helicopter, your body starts arming itself for this experience it's about to have. And it's why we say things weird and do things weird. So for one thing, I can say that if you're a flight instructor, ask your student, this is just sort of a trick to catch yourself, right? Ask your student if it's okay if you record a lesson, not for their sake, but if they want it recorded, they can have a copy of it too. Watch yourself teach. Listen to the words you use, the things you do with your hands and stuff, and you'll go back and watch yourself and probably hardly recognize yourself. You'll find that you stutter, that you repeat yourself in a way that's not healthy sounding, and your student is hearing this and maybe not picking up on all of it, but when you take yourself out of that environment and you listen to yourself, like, I talk like that when I'm teaching, like, God, what am I thinking? Like, I can give you the most beautiful ground lesson on it in the classroom, and then you put me in the helicopter in it and I'm a bumbling idiot, but it's true. We all have that 10% degradation, some more, honestly, some less.
Yeah. But I mean, I would be in the camp of almost saying that, like you said before, some would argue that it's even higher than 10%. Yeah. Because I think that we're fighting adaptation, right? I mean, how long have humans been flying? Since, 1904? We're not meant to fly. It's like being on the water, too. It's, I think a lot of the same principles that we bring to flying also is, for those that choose a path in, more of the marine style of, we're not meant to be on the water. We're not meant to be in the air. Obviously, gravity is very, very intense. And it almost seems like, the engine's running. You got your little amygdalas, which I think is your fight, flight, freeze. Yeah, fear and aggression. It's like, those are like, hey, this is not normal. By the way, like, we've been working for 10,000 years now, and this is still really is very uncomfortable for us. So I would 100% agree.
Yeah, so it's like, so what do you do with that, right? Like, well, first you just have to acknowledge I'm dumber the second I get in the aircraft or get near the aircraft. So that's actually powerful information to have. If you are armed with the knowledge that you are more likely to do something stupid, right, you can take steps to mitigate that stupidity, right? We're never going to get it back to 0%. I'm never going to be 100% mental capacity, sharpest person in the world when I'm in an environment like that, no matter how long I do it for. But what we can do is say, I know that I am pre-armed here to maybe make some stupid decisions because of the stress involved with flying. When I'm going to make a decision, to make an honest evaluation of why do I want to do that right now? Is that really, let's not do that. Actually, it was sort of a momentary thing. This choice that I'm going to do this maneuver or do that, or I'll just turn with the tailwind. It's not very bad or whatever. It's like, actually, how hard would this be to explain to someone later, maybe an accident investigator, and another wise instructor, Steve Merritt, he passed away not too long ago in a Cessna, unfortunately, that had suffered an engine failure. But he one of the best instructors I ever flew with, and he was an airplane instructor. I did some airplane training with him. And, we used to joke, we'd bounce stuff off each other. I was flying with helicopter students. He's flying with airplane students, and we swapped stores with each other. He was running the airport up in Lewisburg, North Carolina at the time. And just fantastic guy, friends everywhere. Everybody knew Steve, But we'd go over there and we'd swap stories. And I said, Steve, what do you brief your students on for pre-solo flight? Like right before they go solo, what do you tell them? Because he says, well, I've asked guys all the time, what can I do? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do power off 180s? Can I do this and that? And he says, he's like, I've been teaching this for 40 years. He says, I tell them they can do whatever they want as long as they can explain to the accident investigator. He said, and that keeps them from doing all this stuff. It's like we kind of carry that attitude ourselves forward. Like if you're about to make a decision, right, or put yourself in a scenario, could you sit down in front of a panel of people that would love to put you away because of loss of life or property damage, that would love to put you away, take your certificates or worse, because of the choices that you made? Could you defend those choices to those people? And if you abide by that sort of policy, you will find yourself no longer doing stupid stuff. When we're all new and stuff, hot dogging was kind of like, it was like expected. And like you see another pilot with a little more time hot dogging in that R-44 out there, and you're like, wow, he's really good. He's got really good control over that. He's the best. Yeah. And as time goes on, you like start looking at that as like, well, that's dumb. Well, that's needlessly risky.
Not very smart.
And it's crazy how that attitude sort of changes with time,
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's, you see it all the time on Facebook, right? I mean, there's a lot of armchair quarterbacks and usually it's for good reason, because people post, like sometimes people post a video. I'm like, what are you doing? I know someone that recently posted, a video on a Facebook story of him flying, IFR in his R66, and he's like, he's not only in IFR in an uncertified aircraft for IFR operations, but he's filming it while he's doing it. Like, what could go wrong? And this
is the stuff the NTSB loves to have.
Oh, yeah, of course. And it's just, it's too bad that a lot of people don't take that same respect. And, I think that it's our body, in anything that we're doing, right? We're always kind of fighting what our brains want us to do versus what we know is maybe more appropriate, on a cognitive level. Right. So it's like, your body might say, or your brain might say, hey, go and do this or do that. Where it's like, you're almost saying, hey, let's slow down for a second, really allow our cortex to think about it.
Yeah.
And the amygdalas are important for human survival, right? Like if you're driving and there's a Ford coming at you head on, you're not going to go and, analyze, oh, it's a Ford with a blue stripe. Right. Oh, I'm going to swerve now, right? Like you don't want your cortex making immediate decisions. You want your amygdalas to fire and say, hey, crank over here. Yeah. And I think that in helicopter flying, sometimes we have to rely on the amygdalas, right? The engine fails, do what is remembered and react at that moment. And, then you can kind of get that cortex involved and start actually cognitively thinking of the situation. Okay, hey, I did what I got to do. I got my landing spot down here now. And you can really start actually bringing your brain back into the process. Right. But even just bringing your brain into the process of everything we do and always questioning yourself. Hey, I even remember, like, I know maybe it sounds silly, but, even being a professional pilot, I'm going to go land on a hospital pad. Like, I'm always thinking like, okay, like are the winds actually coming from here? I'm halfway through my approach. Does it seem like the winds are doing the same thing up here that the little sock says at the hospital pad? Right. And does my power kind of match what my experience is? I'm always kind of questioning the situation to not just put myself in hopefully a poor situation. And, I think that's the hard part of being, a pilot, right? Is we are so human, and that really gets in the way of making good decisions and hot dogging and specifically with some of the people that you may work with that are not professional pilots, right? Guys that are more hobbyists. There's a lot of really good pilots out there that aren't professional pilots. There's also a lot of really wealthy people that don't make the best pilots.
Sure.
I always kind of tell people that gravity doesn't necessarily care how large your bank account is.
It does not discriminate.
It actually seems to want to kill you more often. So, I hope that there's some people out there that can take some true merit in that and kind of slow down, recognize that you're already at a disadvantage because you're in this crazy environment. I look at helicopters, I look at airplanes, and I'm amazed. And then, let alone, I'm flying a helicopter, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like, this is PFM, right? Pure freaking magic. You can also use a different word, but there's just so much going on that really is amazing, but also at any point will kill you. And you can induce that.
This starts at day one, right? If you've got a student, or you're overhearing students being trained, what you don't want to do, which is what is always done, is that we're training them like, don't worry, you'll get used to it. This is the new normal for you. This is helicopters. This is what helicopters do. This is what they sound like. You're going to get used to it. It should never be normal. And that's the healthy way to look at it is, listen, you're never going to completely adjust to this. You need to be protecting yourself up here. You need to have heightened senses. Your body's trying to protect itself. Listen to it, Yeah. And that it actually does improve your hearing and improve your sense of vibration and temperature changes and stuff, because your body is armed for like that fight or flight, like you were saying.
It's so cool. Yeah.
And listen to those sensations. So they're marvelous and miraculous machines for them to be able to trigger that sort of response in us, and then have us go use some of our higher level brain function while all that's going on to fly an instrument approach or something like that, or to do some of the things that take a couple more steps. Like, it's actually a pretty amazing sort of experiment happening in every cockpit of flying around the world right now. Yeah,
it's really cool. And I definitely feel like the industry is moving in a direction of safety and talking about these things openly, and not making it the bottom line is less important than than getting your crew home safely, or getting yourself home, and being able to make that decision. So, I think it's good to see that the industry as a whole is moving that direction. Unfortunately, we still have accidents, quite often. And it does seem like a lot of the accidents are seldomly the helicopter, right? Got some freak ones, a bird takes out the pitch link on your rotor system. I mean, that's just unlucky, or your rotor falls off, whatever it might be. I mean, the helicopter can fail, but it seems like more often than not, in my experience, that some of the people that I've known that have perished in a helicopter accident, it's not always some bit of a surprise of like, I guess I might have maybe saw that coming. And I know that sounds kind of crappy to say, but it's really true. It's this mindset that sometimes some people bring into the flying environment, and I'm guilty of it. I've done things that I'm like, that could have killed me, and that was really stupid. I think we're all guilty, and I think that we have to know our vulnerability, right? Hazardous attitudes are silly, but they're so true. Being invulnerable and being macho, and I mean, you see it all the time. You read these reports, and it's like, okay, I know what are the 5 antidotes, and it's like, this can't happen to me, and it's like, it certainly can, and it will. If you keep doing what you're doing, you will kill yourself. And so I think it's really important that people just, I always say, take it seriously. This is a big, crazy, fun thing that we do, flying helicopters. But if you don't have this higher level of professionalism that you bring to the entire operation, then you really could, kind of bite yourself in the butt. So, man, I love talking that kind of stuff. And this is cool. This is the first episode that we've actually really dived into talking about safety and whatnot. I'm kind of cutting my teeth trying to figure out how to host this thing. And we've been kind of doing A to B career path stuff, which is cool. And I hope a lot of people have taken a lot of interest in that, and I know that they have, but it's really cool to really sit down and start talking cheddar here in regards to helicopter safety. And I feel like this is a topic that can be talked about forever, but we're coming up on our time here. Erik, thank you so much, man. This has just been an absolute pleasure to have you on talking about safety. It's great to hear your perspectives. You bring up some really strong training objectives and points. So I really hope that our listeners out there that are maybe in that training environment are listening to some of that advice, but also some experienced pilots are also kind of thinking, you know what, this Thresher 10% rule, maybe there's something to it, so I think that's really cool. Excuse me. If someone wants to get a hold of you again, just reminder one more time, what's the best way to do it?
Yep, just go direct to my website, safehelicopters.com, www.safehelicopters.com.
Safehelicopters.com. You can provide pilot services. You do flight instruction. You also are doing, Zoom style ground school, which sounds cost effective, and it seems like a great way. So if you are learning how to fly and you are stumped on a topic, specifically weight and balance, don't call me. Call Erik. I'm sure Erik can get you all sorted out. But Erik, thank you so much. Anything else that you'd like to finish with?
No, it was great to be on. Thank you for having me, Halsey.
Man, let's make it a routine, man. Let's get you on soon, okay?
Let's do it. I'd love to.
Thanks so much, Erik. We'll talk to you later, bud.
Take care. Thanks.
And I have to do my podcast job. Thanks, everyone, for listening. If you like, please press like, subscribe, download, whatever it is. We're on most podcast platforms, Spotify, iTunes, etc. You can also check us out on our Helicopter YouTube. We post these videos, or you can just listen to us. So I really appreciate all the positive feedback. People are downloading, people are enjoying. Please keep messaging me. It's so fun to connect with everyone from not just here in the States, but all around the world. So I really feel like this Helicopter podcast is creating a network of really awesome people. So thanks everyone for making that possible. And we'll get next time for the Helicopter podcast.
As always, a special thanks to Helicopter for producing this podcast. Specializing in helicopter evaluations, faster sales, and superb service, Helicopter is the go-to agency for clients expecting immediate results. Helicopter's team of helicopter professionals are the best in the business. Using their aviation expertise, a nationwide network, and a proprietary 76-step listing strategy, Helicopter will convert your listing from Mayday to payday. Ready to get started? Text Helicopter to 1-855-Helicopter. That's Helicopter to 1-855-735-5226, and a Helicopter pilot agent will reach out. Helicopter. List it, sell it, done.